sit back, relax, and maybe grab a snack because the story I'm about to tell you is a little long, but also good. Oh, was I not supposed to grab a snack? I'm telling the story. Okay, cool. So the guy telling us the story says that he's only ever shared this with a handful of people, and that's because he understands that it sounds crazy, but what he's about to share is very real. So he says growing up, him and his brother Emilio were very close. They would do everything together. They were inseparable, and he says that every day after school, they would always race to the pier. He said that they would never get tired of like running in between people's boats or even getting their fishing reels and playing with them. But he says that out of nowhere, his brother Emilio just started acting really weird. He noticed that every night when everybody was asleep, Emilio would get up and get out of the room, and he doesn't know where he would go. He said that in the beginning he thought he was only getting up to go to the restroom. However, he found out that he was not just going to the restroom, he was actually leaving the house, and that was because one night he followed his brother Emilio, and that's when he saw that he was leaving out the front door. Before he left, he actually told Emilio, "What are you doing? Where are you going?" He said that Emilio very calmly told him that he was gonna go to the pier because his friends were waiting for him. He said that that got him very confused because Emilio didn't have any friends that lived close by. He tried to convince his brother to come back inside to go to bed, but Emilio told him that it was okay for him not to worry, that he wasn't gonna take long, and that everything was gonna be okay. He had no choice but to let his brother leave, and he also mentioned that this started happening now every single night. Emilio would leave every night telling him the same thing, that he was gonna go meet his friends at the pier. He explains that Emilio did not care how many times he got after him or tried to get him in trouble, like he insisted on going out to the pier to meet with his friends. He says that one night he just decided that he couldn't just ignore this any longer, and he decided to follow Emilio. He said that it was a very cold night and the only light source that he had was the moon. He says that he noticed that Emilio never had shoes on when he left the house, and that he tried to keep him at a distance because he didn't want Emilio to catch him. So he followed Emilio all the way to the pier, and he saw where he sat down at the edge and basically dangled his feet above the water. He was laughing and talking with somebody, but from where he was, he couldn't fully see who he was laughing and talking with. He got a little bit closer, making sure that he wasn't making any noise, and as he got closer is when he saw who Emilio was laughing and talking to. In the beginning, he had no idea what he was looking at. There were two figures in the water, and they were right in front of Emilio. He says that they had human faces, but they were all deformed, almost as if they had masks of something that maybe one day were human. He could tell that where the eyes should be was just open and sunken in, like there was no eyeballs, and that their mouths were like all twisted, and it was just terrifying. And the worst part about it was that he can tell that these things were like enjoying and laughing and having conversations with Emilio, almost as if they were old friends. Oh my god, I have chills. He said that he immediately wanted to scream at Emilio to get back away from them, but like his body didn't let him. He was terrified. He was in shock. It was also in that moment where he noticed that one of those figures in the water saw him. He said that he noticed that the thing's eyes, if that's what you want to call them, because obviously they had no eyeballs, were like stuck on him, like glued on him, and that twisted laugh smile was immediately gone. He said that he felt like this thing was only looking at him to see if he could like take him over, like almost as if it was deciding what to do with him. And that's when the second figure that was in the water also turned its head towards him, and in a split second both of those figures went underneath the water, and that is when he saw two giant tails, almost as if they were mermaids. Side note, I feel like if mermaids were real, this is what they would be looking like. It's not like the Little Mermaid Ariel, like not that pretty, but anyway, that's if you believe in these type of things. In that moment is when Emilio finally turned to look at his brother, and he looked terrified. He ran up to him, and Emilio tells him, "Please don't tell mom and dad," almost crying. "If they find out, they're never gonna let me come back to the pier." He says that he grabbed Emilio's arm, walked his ass all the way back home without even saying a word. He was in shock, and it was only until they were inside of the house in their room where he turns to Emilio and said, "What were those things? Why were you so calm with them? Like, why were you so talkative and laughing with them. Emilio explains that for a few weeks he had been woken up by like a singing that made him go to the pier because it felt like it was calling out to him. Emilio said that in the beginning he was scared, but after a while he got very curious. The very first time he actually saw them, he went to the pier, and that he was very scared, but that they started talking to him and that they didn't do anything back to him. That they could tell that he was very scared, so they talked to him very calmly and gained his trust. Emilio explained that ever since that first meeting, they would call to him every night. Emilio tells his brother that they want him to swim with them. He says that they told him that it was going to be fun, but that he was kind of scared because he didn't know how to swim. And Emilio admitted to his brother that he was scared that they were going to drown him. He says that when Emilio tells him this, he felt a terror that he had never felt before, and he even told Emilio that he would not be going to the pier anymore. Not even during the day, not even after school. They would not be setting foot in that pier ever again. After that, Emilio would wake up his brother and tell him every time his friends were calling out to him, and he said that he would assure that Emilio would never leave the house, even if it meant that he had to stay up all night so that he didn't leave. He says thankfully with time, Emilio stopped hearing that calling or that singing that was attracting him to the pier. He explains that the worst of it came after. Obviously he's grown up and he was still in the area, and he had been by the pier because he was talking to one of the fishermen there. He for some reason felt very safe and comfortable to tell this man the story of what happened to Emilio those years ago. When he finished telling him the story about what happened to Emilio, this fisherman had dropped everything he had been doing, looked at him with like a very straight face, and this fisherman, who had been working at that pier his entire life, explains to him that in that area of the pier for many years kids would disappear, and that they had never found like any of these children's bodies, not even an article of clothing. He explains that he feels like Emilio got so lucky that he wasn't taken because it's obvious that something was going on in that area. He thinks that these beings were trying to take him somewhere where nobody has returned from. He explains that even though years have passed by and this seems to be history for them, sometimes he wakes up in the middle of the night and he swears that he could hear like a singing or a song, and it feels like it's calling out to him.
This story comes from Abuka, all the way from Nigeria. I didn't know that Spooky Scary Storytime had listeners in Nigeria, so I think that's really cool. So hi, Abuka. Abuka says that he grew up in Warri, which is the oil capital of Nigeria. Think of it similar to like Texas of the United States, and lots of international oil companies are located there. Abuka's dad worked for one of these international companies, and it paid well. So because of this, Abuka and his siblings went to a private school, and all the kids that went to this school were from elite families, and it was very, very posh. The name of the school was St. Luke's Primary School, and Abuka says there was a playground outside. It was a really great time, really great experience at this school. But one day, all the kids are outside playing on the playground, which was right next to a riverbank. And the playground was marked by a chain that kind of ran the perimeter to make sure that kids didn't wander too close to the riverbank, and they all knew not to go too close anyway. They had been warned, and Abuka says this was the 90s, and kids were more compliant and did what they were told. But on this one particular day, one of Abuka's classmates starts walking toward the riverbank, and she gets to the chain, she ducks underneath, and starts getting dangerously close to the river. And everybody saw what was going on, and they started freaking out, calling her name, telling her, hey, come back. It was like she couldn't hear them. She didn't flinch, she didn't turn around when they called her name, and eventually a group of like 50 kids were screaming for her, telling her to come back because it was too dangerous. Some were running to get teachers, but she ignored all of this and just kept walking until eventually she walked into the river and disappeared. Her father was called, and he was one of the higher-ups at one of the big international oil companies. She was an only child, and so eventually, pretty soon after this happened, they had boats and helicopters owned by this oil company searching the water. This massive search that went on for 3 days, but she was not found. After days and days of searching, though, the search was eventually called off, and the adults just assumed that she had been swept out by the river. It was very sad. All the kids were distraught. Her family was obviously distraught. The oil company ended up installing a massive wire net to separate the playground from the riverbank to prevent this from happening again. School eventually resumed, and a few weeks later, the kids are outside playing again on the playground when the little girl who had just disappeared walked out of the river and onto the playground. She was dripping wet. She was still in her school uniform. And all of the kids, as soon as they saw her, started screaming. Some ran to get teachers, and everybody was telling her, you're going to be in so much trouble. She just gave everybody blank stares, and they eventually realized that she was deaf. Abuka says she had not been deaf prior to going into the river, but now she clearly was. And from that day forward, she became obsessed with mermaids, often scribbling pictures of them wearing crowns. in elaborate undersea landscapes. And this shook them so much that Ibuka's parents actually ended up pulling Ibuka and his brother out of that school because apparently the belief in mermaids or sirens in Nigeria is very widespread, and they were worried that their kids would be called into the river next. The person who is claiming to be a veteran who worked at Area 51 is saying that they're not keeping things from the sky there, they're keeping things from the sea there. Yep, mermaids, and he says he saw them. Now, a couple things about this story. I can't prove the legitimacy of it because they used a burner email to send it. If this is fake, it's super weird that someone took all the time to create a fake email, send me a story, to troll me anonymously. If that's the case, it's totally possible. I'm not discrediting that. But he says he sent this anonymously because he has to be sure that this is not going to be traced back to him. Some of you are going to believe it. Some of you are not going to believe it. That's cool. I don't know what I believe, but I'm just here to say the weird thing out loud. And you guys said you wanted the weird story. So he said when he was working at Area 51, he had a very specific job that kept him restricted to a very specific area. He was not allowed to go or work anywhere outside that area until one day he got reassigned after someone else went on leave, or they had a change of plans and they had to replace somebody. So he gets reassigned to the other side of the base where he has never been to before. He's one of the few people on the base that knows how to do this very specific job, and they need someone like right now. So before he goes over to that other side of the base, his supervisor looks at him and says, no matter what happens, do not ask any questions. Do you understand me? His supervisor takes him to the other side of the base, and they have to go through all kinds of clearances that he's not used to. And now I'm not sure if he's talking about getting onto Area 51 specifically, the entire base, or this area specifically, but he said they took his phone, his smartwatch, they even scanned his glasses to make sure he didn't have any kind of recording device. They also take his keys. He said he wasn't allowed to have anything in there besides the clothes on his back, and they did a full body search. They take him to whatever station he's going to be doing this job that he's going to do, and he said there were cameras every 5-10 feet. His new supervisor, who has taken over from the old one, says no matter what noises you hear, keep your eyes forward, keep your eyes on the job, don't look around. As they are walking down this corridor with dim lighting and cameras every 5-10 feet to where his station is going to be, he smells what he can only describe as seawater. He said it smelled like SeaWorld. As they're walking, 3 more military escorts join them, and they walk him into what he describes as an ISS classroom, where it's just a concrete room with a computer, a desk, and a chair. They lock him in and tell him to signal to the camera when he's done working. Works for a few hours. He signals to the camera that he's ready to go. Escorts come back. They grab him. They're walking him back down the hallway. He sees some other people in the hallway moving from room to room, but they are looking straight ahead. Nobody's looking at each other. As they're walking back to the exit, a door opens to his left. He happens to look in, and he sees 2 giant tanks with what he describes as a male and female mermaid inside. He says he only thinks they were male and female because he noticed one had long dark hair. The person came out and quickly closed the door behind him, but he had already seen it, and that's when the supervisor says, keep your eyes ahead like I told you. Before the door closed, he said he also noticed what looked like a table with very large bones on it in front of the tanks. After they pass, the supervisor says, did you see anything? And he says no. Walk him out of that building. His real supervisor picks him up in front of the building and seems relieved that he's back. Then when they get back, he says, did you see it? For some reason, he felt like he was being tested, so he says, I didn't see anything. He says later that night, he and his wife were eating dinner at home. It was about 8:30 p.m. He says nothing, even though his wife was military too. 3 trucks pull up to the outside of his house. It's high-ranking military officials. They come in, they start questioning him, asking if he saw anything. He says he didn't see anything. But he said he did. And this took place in 2015. He said he can still see their faces vividly in his mind. He was never a believer in anything like this, but now he does. He said he's no longer in the army. Now, again, can't prove the legitimacy of this. Could be a fake story. Something for you to consider. Let me know what you think. I want to believe.
Has anyone had a creepy experience out at sea? I worked with a man at an Amazon warehouse that migrated to the US from Haiti, and he had the best paranormal stories. One story he told about the ocean was that his aunt was kidnapped by mermaids and lived under the water for 7 days. I don't have details because he told me these stories years ago, but I know mermaid stories are very common in Haitian culture. I believe this, especially after the whole dolphin thing. I believe this. I was stationed on a 270 cutter in the Coast Guard. Engineer, so I spent mid-watches in the control room doing a round of the engine room every hour. It was something like 2 a.m., so I got up to do a round, which usually took about 15 minutes. One of the checks was the oil level on the engines. I had a rag in each pocket of my cargo pants, felt one get tugged, and just figured it got caught. Wasn't possible, because I was standing stationary in the middle of a 4-foot wide catwalk between the engines with literally nothing around me. But that's how my brain rationalized it at that hour. I shrugged it off. I turned to check the oil on the other engine and felt the tug again. Rag was missing and about 10 feet away on the deck plate. I noped the fuck out of there back to controls. Had Chief on watch as well in the control room. He played back the recordings, but couldn't see it because it was on the opposite side, of course. But he could see my confusion, and when I turned, it was missing and see me walk over to pick it up. Also had taps on the shoulder a lot below deck and felt like someone was behind me. Saw shit out of the corner of my eye a lot too. Heard footsteps in the middle of the night in the engineering spaces when we were in port and everything was shut down. It was a bizarre experience. Okay, no, because ghosts in the middle of the ocean is terrifying. Like, who is it? It could literally be anybody. It could be anybody's spirit. My dad is a semi-professional fisherman. He's done big tournaments since I was a kid, and we are both pretty old now. Dad is a very no-nonsense kind of man, somewhat of a hillbilly to be frank with you, but very intelligent, level-headed, and not the kind of guy to make up stories. But a couple Christmases ago, at dinner, he said this: "I've seen all kinds of UFOs out on the water at night fishing. Now, I'm not going to go into details about it, because y'all probably wouldn't believe me anyway, but all the stuff people say about big ol' motherships taking up the whole sky, things flying up out of the water, missing time, abductions, all of that, I believe them, and I'll leave it at that." This was told by someone in the Navy. His friend was on a ship deployed during Vietnam. They used the freezers to store the deceased on the ship, and the ship also provided civilian support like medical. One night, one of the corpsmen had an overnight shift in the clinic and decided to nap on a gurney. When he flipped over to adjust, there was a little girl sitting on the next gurney, facing him. He jumped out of there super quick to find someone to sit with until he felt less creeped out. Another guy was on a ship at sea. The guy had gone on a fantail for a smoke break and saw a guy sitting on the rail. He went to ask if he was okay, and the guy just pushed over the side. They called man overboard to search for him, but never found anyone, and no one came up missing. My grandfather was anchored in a little isolated bay once for the night. He was woken up at 2 a.m. by his dogs going crazy, followed by a deathly woman's scream and the sound of a large chop. In the morning, he rode into the bay and found nothing out of place aside from footprints on the sand. He reported it to the Coast Guard, but they came back and said it wasn't much to worry about, as they'd had a lot of reports over the years saying the same thing. Turns out that before my country was colonized and before access to the bay was cut off, it was inhabited by a local indigenous tribe. One of the stories of the tribe is how the chief caught his wife with a man from another tribe and chased her down to that bay before removing her head. So it's believed that the screaming heard in that bay is that night's incident replaying forever. As a kid, I liked to go swimming in the sea. One day I swam out further than normal until I could not feel the sand underneath my feet anymore. I suddenly felt something grab at my ankle and try to pull me down. I panicked and swam as fast as I could to get back to shore, only it seemed to be getting further away, not closer. It was as if time was not following the usual course. I eventually get back to the shore, but didn't remember getting back there. I was about 10 or 11 years old. I can still feel the pulling around my ankle and the feeling of dread. I have never taken a swim in the seas since. A mermaid, perhaps?
I had a surgeon email me and tell me that he saw not only a mermaid, but a djinn mermaid. Obviously, I cannot reveal his identity because he is in the medical field and he doesn't want this to get back to him at all. He wants to remain completely anonymous, but I'm going to tell you exactly what he saw and how he saw it. So we're going to call him Adam for the story. So when Adam was about 7 or 8 years old, he often accompanied his father and his aunt on trips to Detroit for his cousin's medical care. The reason that they had to go on these medical visits is because his cousin, when she was younger, stuck her hand in a metal fan and lost 2 fingers when they lived in Pakistan. So after they moved to America, his father would often drive his aunt and his cousin to Detroit to get medical care. Now, these hospital visits were obviously boring for Adam, and so sometimes to pass the time, his father would take him on drives nearby the hospital. One place they would often visit was called Belle Isle. It was an island park in the middle of the Detroit River. There was this road that looped around the island, and him and his father would just talk and listen to the radio as they slowly drove past it. It was during one of these drives that something happened, something that he has never been able to forget. As they're driving along the river, he notices something in the water that immediately just felt wrong. He's looking at this thing and his mind is just not grasping what he's seeing. It appeared humanoid in shape, but larger than a person. It was not a mermaid in the way that cartoons or movies depict them, but it was like the closest thing that his childhood mind could kind of refer to. The coloration really stood out to him. It was like this greenish blue tone that did not match the river or anything else around it. What kind of unsettled him the most, though, was not the shape, it was the feeling. He had this distinct feeling that this thing was looking directly at him, and he does not know how he knew that. He could not recall facial features, but there was an unmistakable awareness. He knew that he was seeing it, and he also knew that it was aware of him in return. There was no distinct feeling of threat or malice. If anything, he just felt confusion, almost as if it was just a surprise that he could see it as he was to be seeing it. So the entire encounter only lasts a couple seconds, but instinctively he turns to his dad to tell him what he's seeing. Before he could even finish speaking, the figure just slipped back beneath the surface of the water. Here's the weird part. As it disappeared, appeared, he saw its lower half clearly. What went under was not human at all. This thing had a massive, powerful tail, wide and horizontal like that of a whale. It moved with a single smooth motion, submerging completely and leaving the surface of the river strangely calm. Then when he turns back to look at it, it's just gone. At this point, he doesn't know how to explain what he saw, and he immediately begins to doubt himself. The memory never faded. He still remembers the color, the shape, and that brief moment of shared awareness. Later on that night, he starts talking to his dad about it, and to his surprise, his dad tells him that he believes that he saw something too. His dad saw that he saw a dorsal fin on a tail fin sticking out of the water, like that of a large shark. And on a side note, his dad spent approximately 2 decades of his early adult life working on fishing trawlers and cargo ships. He was a radio officer, so he sent and received Morse codes to communicate with other ships and those on land. He said that his dad has seen things that other people don't know about, that there is stuff in the water that people don't know about. And here's the interesting part. Adam, as an adult with more cultural and theological context, he has come to his own interpretation. In Islamic tradition, there is a class of jinn known as murid, beings often associated with water. Personally, he believes that what he encountered may have been a murid, not something evil or predatory, but something that exists alongside us, usually unseen. He said that of course he doesn't rule out any logical explanations. The Great Lakes do connect to the ocean, and sharks like bull sharks can live in fresh water for years, and it's not out of the realm of possibility that one made it to the Detroit River. But he said, and I quote, "But what I remember seeing was not a shark, at least not the top half." Detroit has had a long reputation of strange and unsettling experiences. Packs of wild dogs roaming parts of the city. This is something I did not know. The city's folklore also includes L'Anon Rouge, a devilish imp said to appear as a harbinger of bad luck. This is going back to the founding of Detroit in the 17th century. Even as a child, Adam had a vague sense that Detroit carried layers of history and oddness beneath the surface. Interestingly, the last reported sighting of L'Anon Rouge was in 1976. It was before a large snowstorm that ravaged the city. And this year is said to be on par with 1976 in terms of snow accumulation and cold weather. So there may be more sightings of the red dwarf. So what did you guys think about that story? I do not feel good right now. I don't know if you guys can tell, but I have been sick now for 2 days and it is awful. But do you guys think that he saw a mermaid? Do you think that he saw a jinn? Do you think he saw a jinn mermaid? I've never heard anything like this before. And I find it very interesting that what I've always heard about jinn, and I could be wrong, is that they aren't good. But I vaguely remember people in my comments saying that jinn can be good and they can be bad. So please let me know, because I would love to know what the answer to that question is. I could also look it up online, but it's better coming from people, especially if someone here that is watching right now is in Islamic culture. If you could just kind of let me know what's going on with the whole jinn situation, I would appreciate that. And also, has anybody ever seen anything weird in the Detroit River? And if you guys have seen mermaids, please email me, because I want to know about it and I want to tell your story, because I find them to be so interesting. The whole fin thing, and that creeped me out. The whole face, how he couldn't see its face. I wish he could see its face. But so weird to know that something is looking at you without seeing its face. I've gotten so many stories where people are like, it had no face, but I knew that it was looking at me. Now I'm going to go on a deep dive about the Detroit River, because that is so interesting to me. But tell me what all your thoughts, opinions, and suggestions are in the comments. And as always, please be respectful. And with that being said, I'm not going to do my favorite part, which is the shout outs. 25645, you are so sweet. Thank you so much for what you said. I really appreciate that. I appreciate you commenting and pushing my videos out, and I appreciate you loving my stories. That means so much to me. I appreciate you watching them. Honestly, the fact that I have 150,000 people now that like my stories and follow me is so unreal to me. I need to do a little celebration for 150k, because I am so lucky, especially because of all the people that I have following me are so nice, including you, and I appreciate you being a part of that so much. You have no idea. I feel so lucky to have people like you just in my corner and in my community, and I truly hope you know how much I appreciate you as an individual. Thank you so much for supporting me. I love you. Michelle.Winford, you're so sweet. I feel so lucky to be your favorite storyteller. That is my favorite when I hear that, as you guys know, because there are a lot of very good storytellers on here. Really good storytellers. The paranormal community is filled with just the most awesome people, honestly, genuinely, that are so talented and so kind. And so when people tell me that I'm their favorite, it really is such a huge compliment. So thank you so much for commenting and saying that and pushing out my video. Thank you for being a part of my community and watching my, sorry, I have something in my eye, watching my videos. It truly does mean so much to have you in my corner and have you be a part of this little thing that I have built. So I hope you know that. Thank you. I love you. And with that being said, my name is Kaisa, and I tell your paranormal experiences on here, or paranormal experiences that you recommend to me from the paranormal world. So if you're into that, hit that follow button, and I just need you to do 3 things for me. And what are those? Keep sending me your scary stories, have a safe night, and what's the third one? Say it with me. Have a spooky night. Love you guys so much. See you in the next one. Spooky kisses and haunted hugs.
Do you believe that mermaids are real? And would you believe me if I told you that many people have had encounters with them? I haven't done a mermaid story in my page in so long, but I am back with another spooky story. We're gonna call the person who submitted the story Rosie. So Rosie is from South Africa in a small town called Sakane on East Rand of Johannesburg. So as a kid, Rosie always had this feeling that she was born to bring about change. Like, this feeling was very strong, and she would tell her family about it, but they would just ignore her. So when Rosie turns about 6 to 7 years old, this is when she started to have these weird dreams, where she would have dreams about mermaids, and she would tell her grandmother, but her grandmother would ignore her. The dreams about mermaids would come every 2 weeks. So now fast forward to Rosie being 10. That's when she started to feel drawn to the water. She felt this pull as if she was being called to the water. And again, she would tell her grandmother, and her grandmother would ignore her. The grandmother would tell her, honey, it's just a feeling, it'll go away. But Rosie just lived with this feeling for a while. Fast forward again, now Rosie is 13 years old. And at that age, that's when Rosie entered high school, and she said that is when her life took a crazy spiritual turn. Once Rosie entered high school, she started experiencing something that she hadn't experienced before. The first day, she's hearing singing. So she looks over and asks her friend, like, hey, are you hearing this too? And her friend responded in a very exaggerated no. So she just brushed it off and said, maybe I'm just hearing things. She really didn't harp on that too much. Like, it's not a big of a deal that she heard singing and her friend didn't hear it. Now, fast forward a couple of days. It happened again. The singing did happen again, but this time, her and her friend heard it. And it was literally coming from the direction of the dam. Mind you, the dam is 30 feet away from their lunch table, so it's relatively close. So as they're hearing this singing, something weird started to happen. Rosie says she can't even explain what the hell happened. But both ladies got up and just started walking towards the dam. No, they were not in control of that. And both ladies couldn't stop walking towards the dam. It is as though they were being drugged or something. They were so fogged mentally. Rosie recalls feeling like they were high as fuck. So they got close enough to the dam, and they were about 6 to 8 feet away from the dam. Rosie now starts kneeling on the grass, again, against her will, and began to sing along to the song that the marine slash mermaid spirit was singing. And mind you, Rosie didn't even know the song, let alone the language that these spirits were singing in. However, she kneeled and just joined the interaction, as if she knew the language, as if she sung it before, as if she knew the song. When suddenly, they snap out of it. Rosie looks over at her friend, and her friend is staring at her with this unsettling look of awe in her face. Now, Rosie's looking over at her like, dude, what's up? And her friend looks at her and says, I heard something ask me, why am I here? Now, Rosie knew her bestie, so she could tell she was sure about what she heard. And the friend goes on to ask Rosie if she heard it too. And Rosie just says no. Mind you, even though they snapped out of the trance that they were in, they still were feeling pretty high from whatever was in the air. But Rosie looks at her friend and says, we should go. Now, Rosie starts to feel like there's something heavy in the air. So as they start to walk away, the friend says, stop. Look at that grape tree in the middle of the dam. And she was like, I want some of those grapes. And Rosie says, trust me, I tried to stop her from jumping in, but she just jumped right in. So her friend just jumped into this dam. And Rosie, being so damn scared, doesn't know what to do. Her friend just jumped in this dam, so she decided that monkey see, monkey do. She gonna jump in too. Rosie would jump off a cliff if her friend did it. Rosie says, I was so damn scared, but I just jumped in too so that I can save her. She saw the grape tree in the dam as well. However, her intuition was telling her that this wasn't a real tree. Luckily enough, she pulled her friend out of the water, and that's when she came to her senses. That's when the friend asks, what just happened? What is going on? And Rosie just told her, we have to go. They ran their asses out of there, and once they reached the schoolyard, that's when Rosie broke down everything to the friend. Even though Rosie broke out of her trance, she was just feeling high, her friend was still in it. Pretty much, Rosie's now catching her up on what happened once they reached the schoolyard. Rosie had enough for that day and said, let's go home. And oh my God. As they were about to leave school premises, this beautiful lady comes up to them, and mind you, everybody at the school was already gone by that time. Like, there was no teacher, no scholar, and only one security guard. So this gorgeous lady approaches them. She looks straight at Rosie with the most intense look. Rosie says she's never had anybody stare at her like that before. It felt like this lady was looking into her soul. Rosie describes this lady to have light hazel eyes. She had a lot of gold jewelry on, gold earring, gold necklace, and she had blue nails done. I'm telling you, this lady's presence made everything cold around us. It was a very sunny day, about 35 degrees Celsius. For the normal people, that's 95 degrees Fahrenheit. So it was 95 degrees outside. That lady's presence was so cold, Rosie had goosebumps, chicken skin all over her body. After that encounter, the lady turned around and walked straight in the direction of the dam. As you can see, this story is already 5 minutes long. So I'm recording the part 2 right now, but I'm going to drop it the second that this video hits 10,000 views. And I'm doing it like that because I'm shadow banned on TikTok. So you guys, please go ahead and leave a comment, share this video, just so that it can get boosted. And as soon as it hits 10K, I promise you, I will drop the part 2. Do you believe that mermaids exist? Well, this is a real life mermaid encounter submitted from Sekane, South Africa. Part 2. So after the friend sees this grape tree and just jumps into the dam, Rosie jumps in after her to go rescue her. Now, the friend still being in a trance, once they get back to campus, Rosie catches her up on everything that they just went through. When this beautiful, gorgeous lady with all this gold jewelry walks up to them, doesn't say anything, but just stares at Rosie. And it's a very powerful stare, as Rosie felt like she was looking straight into her soul. Something about this woman made this 95-degree day feel cold. Anyway, after she gets done staring at Rosie, she just turns around and walks straight in the direction of the dam. So Rosie and her friend, they just went home and just straight up never talked about what happened that day. That is until Rosie's spiritual calling demanded her to act and take work of being a healer. And that's when she found out that she should have never went into that dam with her best friend. However, if she didn't save her friend, she would have been dead because that calling was not meant for the friend. The calling was meant for Rosie. And Rosie only. Them some exclusive mermaids. So Rosie was meant to go there alone so she can interact with the marine spirits herself. So Rosie said that she would go on to have so many more experiences and dreams as she woke up to her gifts eventually. And I'm hoping that she will share more of those stories. That was really the end of part 2, y'all. She didn't give any more detail. Now I apologize for being late with this part 2. Yesterday after I posted, I went out and I forgot about y'all. And then I got home, fell asleep, woke up, fell asleep again. And now, you know, you guys have it. If you have a spooky story or a dark and mysterious story or something unexplained that you've experienced and you want to tell me about it, feel free to DM me on Instagram or right here on TikTok. I pick out the best and tell them. Make sure you follow me on Instagram, just so that I know that it's real. And you might want to subscribe to my YouTube for longer, better, and spookier stories. Like I say at the end of every video, I love you, my abducted humans. I'm your favorite Haitian homegirl.
There was this French ecologist named Philippe Garnier. Now, he went down to the Congo, Africa, on this research expedition. And he said he was going down the Congo River to this area where a lot of people have not been before. And he said one of these fishing villages that he came upon, he was going to stay there for like a couple weeks. And he said there were missionaries there who like helped out this tribe and helped him communicate with them. Well, one of the things that he first notices when he gets to this area is that there are all these crosses right next to the river. And so he asked one of the missionaries, like, what is the meaning of these crosses by the river? And he says, well, you see, this tribe here, they believe in what they call the Ninibi. And he said the Ninibi are like these they call river water people who are similar to, in other cultures, like mermaids. And he said they believe that they live in the deep parts of the river. And he said, you know, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, they will appear as what you desire to lure you into the water and take you. And he said these people believe that several of the villagers were taken by them and they are very afraid of them. So he says, it just sounded like a crazy fabricated story or whatever. So he said at this time, after he got done talking to the missionary said, hey, I want to give you this cross, and stuff. And so he takes the cross, he puts it on. And he said, after a couple of days spending time with his tribe, he realized that they were really terrified of these like water river people. And he said one night he went to bed in this hut next to the river, and he remembered it was storming really, really bad. And he said it just kind of kept him up. He couldn't sleep. And then when he finally got to bed, he said he started to have this dream. And he said in this dream, this beautiful woman appeared in his room. And he said she was completely naked. She had this blank stare on her face. And he said she was just moving her shoulders like kind of back and forth. And he said she walked over to the side of where he was sleeping and she started to rub his face. And then he said after that, they became intimate. And he said during this time, he started to notice she was changing. And all of a sudden, this beautiful woman turns into this decrepit corpse. And he said, she had these long, dangly fingers with black nails, sharp black teeth. She had eyes that were like hanging out of the sockets. And he said, it was just the most terrifying thing he had seen. And he said, like when you thought of a mermaid, you thought that it had like this single tail. But he said this woman had both legs, but they looked very aquatic-like. And he said the next thing he remembers is one of the villagers is yelling at him. And he realizes he's not in the hut. He's actually outside next to the river, getting ready to step into the water. And he said right at that moment, there was a flash of lightning and it illuminated the entire river. And he sees the shadow of what appears like something in the water, and it jumps down and splashes. And he said, it was just this really terrifying experience. And he said throughout his times being there, he said at night you could hear whatever these were screaming. And he said it was just probably the most scariest thing you could imagine. And the fear in these villagers' eyes, like, he could tell whatever this was something real.
Somebody submitted a spooky story saying that every woman in her family is said to belong to the water. And when she turned 19, mermaid spirits gave her her first assignment: destroy a marriage. I'm back with another spooky story, and we're gonna call the person who submitted the story Lucy. Now, Lucy says she's never told anyone this story because it does sound unbelievable. However, the women in her family does have ties to the water. So her grandmother used to say that some bloodlines are claimed by the river. Her grandmother told her that long before she was born, one of their ancestors nearly drowned as a little girl. She disappeared underneath the water for hours. When she was found, she was alive, sitting calmly on the riverbank with a cowrie shell in her hand. And from that day on, she changed, and low-key so did the entire bloodline. So she became unnaturally beautiful. Men obsessed over her, women feared her, and she said the spirits of the water had chosen the women in their family to carry out their work on earth. Child, Lucy, listening to this, thought that it was folklore until she turned 19. That was a year that she started dreaming about a woman with waist-length hair sitting on a rock in the middle of the ocean. Her skin shimmered and her voice was soft and very hypnotic. The woman told Lucy, "You are one of mine." And after that, strange things began happening. Married men would become obsessed with Lucy for no reason. She didn't even have to flirt. They would leave their wives, spend money that they didn't have on her to make her happy, and ruin their homes trying to please Lucy. So at first she thought it was a coincidence. Then her grandmother sat her down. She told them that their purpose was not random. She told them that the water spirits blessed them with beauty, favor, and protection. But in return, they are given assignments. So some women in the family are sent to bring wealth, some are sent to heal, and some, like Lucy, are sent to test relationships. Like, excuse me? He explained that if a marriage is weak, then she is drawn onto the husband's path. Her presence exposes what was already broken. If he betrays his vows, the union will collapse. Lucy asked if that made her evil, but her grandmother shook her head and said no. She says the spirits do not force anyone to sin. They reveal what is hidden. And that explanation comforted her for years. But later, as she got older, she began questioning everything. Because the dreams became more intense, the mermaid woman would appear and whisper names to her, specific men. Days later, those exact men would enter her life. Get this, y'all. One was a pastor, one was a businessman, and one was her friend's husband. Every time they pursued her obsessively, their marriages were destroyed every time. This is one of my favorite baking powders. It's the bomb. Anyway, so Lucy tried resisting, but when she ignored the dream, she would wake up soaked in seawater. She would find something on her bedroom floor, or she would hear knocking coming from inside of her bathroom. The nightmares would intensify. Something would always happen. So once, after refusing for months, she nearly drowned in a pool during a party. Something wrapped around her ankles and pulled her under. And as she blacked out, she heard that same familiar voice that was saying, "You cannot reject what you were born to do." Now, Lucy says she survived the whole drowning. However, she was terrified. So at this point, Lucy finally decided to go to a spiritual elder outside of her family, expecting him to tell her that she was cursed. Instead, he said something that changed her life. He said that her gifts are neutral. What matters is how she uses them. He says, yes, your bloodline may be connected to the water. You may have unusual influence over people, but your destiny is not to destroy. Your real calling is to reveal truth and choose kindness. And that hit her hard because for the first time, she understood that she had a choice. She didn't have to become a weapon. She could use her intuition to protect others, set boundaries, refuse to entertain men that were not available, and she could break the cycle. And that night, Lucy dreamt of the mermaid woman again. But this time, she stood there silently in the water, just watching her. She then smiled, and it was like a smile of pride. And she said the mermaid said to her, "At last, you understand." Now, she says she still has assignments, but she no longer believes that she was born to ruin marriages. She said many women in her family were given a gift and many misunderstood it. However, their true purpose is not to destroy love. It is simply to expose what's fake and protect what is genuine, while also moving through the world with wisdom and compassion. The water chose them, but kindness is the legacy that she chooses to leave behind. Ugh. Thank you, Lucy, for submitting your spooky story. If you have a spooky story that you want me to tell, feel free to submit it to me right here on TikTok or DM me on Instagram. I say it, all my videos. I love you, my abducted humans, from your favorite Haitian homegirl.